the book of Zechariah. I'm not exactly sure, but if you hear a woo sound, that's not me or my stomach, but it's the wind blowing here on the Oregon coast, hitting the window on the side of the house and making that sound. Happens fairly often, so just let you know. As far as chapter 2, chapter 1 I mentioned that we're going to have a focus going through this book, and the focus would be on two subjects. One would be, why was Zechariah slain by the Jews? And the second, or what are the apocalyptic events in the book of Zechariah? Chapter 2 has an answer to both of those. It begins, the man with the cord measure. And I lifted my eyes and beheld, and behold, a man, and in his hiri hand a kiro, a kir, hiri, chiropractor, as a derivative, was a measuring line of a surveyor. And I said to him, where do you go? And he said to me, out to measure out Jerusalem and to see how great the width of it is and how great the length. Well, now, which Jerusalem was he talking about at what time? The original temple in Jerusalem was laid out by David. He gave the plans of the temple to Solomon. That's in 1 Chronicles 28:11. And then right before this, or maybe at the same time, Nehemiah went to Jerusalem and went to scope out the wall and the destruction to rebuild it, and that's in chapter 2 of the book of Nehemiah. The next time we see a measure after this one here in Zechariah is mentioned in Ezekiel, which actually he spoke of it a little bit earlier, but he says, and behold, a man, and his appearance was as the appearance of shining brass, and in his hand was a string measure of builders, and a reed measure, and he set them at the gate. And that's Ezekiel 40, verse 3, and I believe that he was measuring the millennial temple. And then in Revelation it says, and was given to me, as John, a reed measure like unto a rod. And the angel stood, saying, arise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and the ones doing obeisance in it. And the outer courtyard of the temple put out, and do not measure it, for it was given to the nations. And they shall tread the holy city 42 months. And that's Revelation 11, 1 and 2. Now, I don't believe that's the millennial temple in Jerusalem, because the people of the nations wouldn't have been in the same type of situation because of the rule of the Lord. Then, so what was he measuring? I believe this was measuring the temple for the time of the beast that was coming, and then that temple would be destroyed. And then the millennial temple would have been built. And then the final measurement was in Revelation 21:15, where it says, and the one speaking with me had a golden measure reed, that he should measure the city, and her gatehouses, and her wall. There was no temple in the New Jerusalem, which it's talking about here, so he measured the city, and that's what we see. So we see this going on, measuring of Jerusalem. In verse 2, and behold, the angelos, an angel, as a transliteration, messenger, speaking with me, stopped. And another angelos went forth to meet with him. So the angel talking with Zechariah stopped, and this is very similar to John going with the angel and talking. Another angel came forth, and he said to the first angel, run and speak to that young man, Zechariah, saying, fruitfully shall Jerusalem be inhabited of a multitude of men and of cattle in the midst of her. Now, when was this? Which Jerusalem? Was it the Jerusalem coming here that they were inhabiting, which is probably was what he was talking about here. And then the Jerusalem that was at time of Jesus, which was destroyed. And then the time of the Jerusalem of the beast. I believe it was the one here that he was at. And I will be to her, says the Lord, a wall of fire round about, and I will be for glory in the midst of her. Now we go in here and we'll see a little bit more. So this is the plan of God, and that he would be a fire around about protecting Jerusalem and Israel, and I will be for glory in the midst of her. Well, Jesus was in the midst of Jerusalem. And then in verse 6, it says, and then I forgot here, and I will be to her, says the Lord, a wall of fire, and I will be for glory in the midst of her. So that would be the Lord in the midst of her. Jesus, who else could it be? Then he continues, flee, fevgete, fugitive comes from that. Flee from the land of the north, says the Lord. For from out of the four winds of the heaven I will gather you, says the Lord. Now, when was this? This is another time of Jerusalem. It doesn't, they're in Babylon and they were coming back, but here it sounds like it's a greater return. I don't know. The time of present time, a lot of Jews are coming from all over the world back to Jerusalem. Unto Zion escape, O the ones dwelling with the daughter of Babylon. Now, so it could be the time of Zechariah. Therefore, thus says the Lord Almighty, Pantokrator, all, pan, all, and krat, might. After glory he has sent me out unto the nations, despoiling you. Now, who is he has sent me? Who is the me? He has sent me out, probably should have been a hyphen structure, 1821-1473, because the out really goes with the X on the apostoke, may. So he sent me out unto the nations, despoiling you. For the one touching you is as the one touching the pupil of his eye. So somebody coming against Jerusalem, Israel, would be as sticking the finger in your eye. For behold, I bear my hand against them, and I will be spoils to the one serving to them. And they will be spoils to the one serving them. So the ones that the Jews are serving to, those people will be spoils to the Jews. And you shall know that the Lord Pantokrator has sent me. Now the me, Jesus, I believe, I don't think it was Zechariah. Then he says, be happy and glad, O daughter of Zion. Wow, so this is Zechariah saying, wow, be happy and glad, O daughter of Zion. Why? For behold, I come, God, Jesus, and I will encamp in the midst of you. Well, that's swell, fine, says the Lord. Okay, should no problem with that. Then 11, and many nations shall take refuge unto the Lord in that day. The nations, the Gentiles, and they will be to him for a people. Whoa! Can you imagine them saying that? Zechariah saying that? The Gentiles, the nations are going to be a people to God? Well, I could see where they'd want to kill him. This is a good point right here. That he's saying something to them that they don't want to hear. They've just been sent into the nations, and now these nations will be taken to him. Boy, it's quite a thing for Zechariah to say. And I will encamp in your midst, and who is I? I can't think of anybody else outside of Jesus. So I would translate this, and I, Jesus, will encamp in your midst, Jerusalem, Israel, the Jews, and you, the Jews, shall realize that the Lord Almighty has sent me to you. Well, they didn't. They didn't realize this. Some of them did, some of them didn't. And the Lord shall inherit Judah, his portion, upon the Holy Land, and will select still Jerusalem. So this is a strange thing, and will select still. So this Jerusalem selected still. Well, did he ever not select it? Yeah, he destroyed it by Nebuchadnezzar, and he destroyed it by Rome. So it sounds like a future time to me that he's talking about here. Then let all flesh show reverence from in front of the Lord, for he was awakened from out of his holy clouds. Jesus comes down in the clouds. He'll come in a cloud. He left the earth in a cloud, and he'll come back that way. Now, the third chapter is another interesting one. We go into the garments of the great priest. And what is his name? Isun. Isus in the nominative. Isun is in the accusative, the object. Isus is Jesus. That's the same name. And Joshua, it's really convoluted what the translators have done. They translated in the Old Testament Joshua, who in the Greek would have been Isus. They gave his name Joshua, and then I think they call him Yeshua some other places, and then here's Joshua again for the Isus is Jesus is the name, the great priest. Standing in front of the angel of the Lord, and the devil standing at the right of him. Well, I'm getting all excited. I want to go into chapter 3, and we're not really going to go into that until the next video seminar. So I'll say goodbye now, and God bless, and come back to chapter 3. It's going to be exciting. Bye-bye.